at its most basic, it's a description or terms that abbreviates financial technology, and that encompasses a wide range of things. It is probably all the ways that technology enhances the way that financial services are delivered and the way finances are managed. And so that's everything from large commercial banking to the mobile app and the retail delivery of financial services, to the things that you probably don't even have a sense of what's happening, say cross-border payments and the way money moves around the world, or interbank systems. So technology is changing all of that, or has already changed all of that, and fintech touches all those areas.
And can you give us a couple examples of maybe some products or innovations that are coming up or like could be under this umbrella?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the most exciting things are the way that I mentioned AI, the way AI is being used in fintech. I think it probably in some of its early incarnations were people focused on things like being able to do algorithmic trading, which is a way to use more intelligent machines, more sophisticated algorithms to trade faster, right? And trade in sophisticated ways that the human brain could not do
Is that what they call
well. That's not high frequency trading.
Okay.
High frequency trading is really a question of throughput, being able to being able to take advantage of latency in the networks and the way the transactions are actually being executed, to push more trades through, or to delay when trades go through, and play with that latency to gain some advantage. So going back to algorithmic trading, that's kind of maybe some of the earliest notions or early uses of AI for in investment management broadly. But now you see it in kind of consumer-facing ways, right? That you have robo-advisors, where instead of talking primarily to a human, you're talking to a human maybe who's being assisted by a machine, or you're yourself using your app to make your investment decisions. Those are the sort of things I think have been there for some time, but they're getting more and more sophisticated and becoming pervasive. And by pervasive, I mean not just a way for you to say, okay, well, I'm interested in getting some investment advice and looking at where my money lies, and combining that all into one app. And there's a number of apps out there that do that.
Would like Betterment go
Betterment's
under one of these?
Example, yep. Personal Capital,
We're
one
fans.
of those, right? So you bring everything in one place, you've got one view, and it may suggest things you would do, but there's probably a limit at how sophisticated that advice can be, at least that being delivered to your app, until you have to get on the phone and talk to someone, right? But that same sort of technology, take that same idea and put that into large scale investment firms like a Goldman Sachs, who has their own robo advisor, right, Marcus. And while there's a I guess retail's probably not the way to think of Goldman Sachs, but there's an outward facing view of that. There is also the ways that they're using that to basically replace the human trading that's happening, so that they can trade at faster and faster and more sophisticated ways, using AI to make the decisions, right? Because that's the essence of AI, is replacing the human cognitive function, being able to take the models that people that we do all the time in our brains, pattern recognition, classifying information, and learning how to make substitutions and extrapolate and draw conclusions. Doing that with a computer is what AI is. And so investment management is a natural place where you can start to think, well, if I can do that with a machine, I can get vast amounts of data about not just the things that you kind of will assume you need to know about trading, like what was the last trading price, and what does it look like? What do the prices look like in this industry? But what are all the other world events that sometimes impact trading? The weather, might affect commodities, and the impact on commodities might affect the trading price of a particular company. Like all of those things, if you can, and really great human traders know how to assimilate all that, aggregate all that information and draw conclusions. Letting a machine do that, you just it exponentially increases your ability to do that quickly, the ability to do it economically, and frankly accurately, right? And so that's some of that's on the financial services side, some of the more exciting things that I think are happening with fintech. But I think also the delivery to services to individuals, right? On the retail front, probably started with things like chatbots and just having more sophisticated customer service. And letting you
I love those.
Right. That. I mean, if that were all, that'd be great. But it can be more, right? It can be being able to provide kind of risk management and AIs to prevent any sort of, identify, fraud very quickly, right? Systems are doing that to control identity theft, right? To be more smart about figuring that out. Certainly to figure out things like money laundering, which maybe doesn't impact individuals, but certainly impacts institutions, and then the prices we have to pay those institutions. There's a long list of things I could go on, as you can see, but it's pretty exciting, I think, and I think we've only scratched the surface.
I mean, so that does bring up a good question. What does this mean for traditional financial institutions like banks? You touched on it briefly, but you're saying like this could affect the front end. What does that mean for the back, like kind of what banks do behind the scenes?
I think it's changing all of that. I think it's a question of and maybe characterizing the way you did the front end and the back end, but what's the back end? There are many, many layers, right? And so there's things that certainly have changed in the front end in a very real way, certainly have changed in the back end in terms of how, for example, trading is managed, or how, for example, if you're looking at things like insurance underwriting. So some of the core analysis that any financial institution has to do, they can use AI to enhance. Probably taking a step beyond that is, well, what do we do with the systems that allow any given institutions to speak with each other or to interact with the banks around the world, right? Those are sophisticated payment networks. Those are sophisticated systems for moving money around the world and trading and exchange and figuring out the exchange rates and all that sort of thing. Those systems are changing over time. And one of the things that, and I know my colleague Marta talked to you a lot about blockchain, the intersection of how fast AI enhances those things and when those things start to move over to blockchain, I could not predict, but it's got to happen, right? I think there's definitely a move to take out where we have essentially an intermediary, like a clearinghouse, to move that, to decentralize things and move that away. Does that get rid of financial institutions? Probably not, but it probably changes the nature of what they do, and it changes what they look like. They look more like tech companies than they look like what they look like today, right?
Mm-hmm. Have they already started implementing some of these?
Sure, they have. I think it was probably a few years ago that you had folks like Goldman Sachs who were starting to characterize themselves like tech companies, frankly, to draw engineers in, to get some of the work, to draw engineers in, right? Because it just doesn't sound cool that you went to work for Goldman Sachs if you're a techie, but it does sound cool if it turns out everyone else is there. It's an engineer and a quant. And I would say a few years ago, it was many years ago, for things like algorithmic trading. Sorry,
that's a hard one.
It's a we're using engineers, but now it can be in all parts of the way they deliver services that they need engineers. And that's that. It probably isn't 100% yet, but it's moving fast.
What does this mean? What could this mean, I guess, for financial inclusion?
So I think some of the interesting work that's happening in tech around inclusiveness is just being able to better educate consumers about what's happening with their money. I mean, it's one thing to give an app like Betterment to people who already have wealth to manage. It's another thing to provide a tool that allow people to learn how to save, to control and understand their expenses. And there are great apps out there for that. I can't name one off the top of my head right now, but I've seen them demoed. I know people are doing that sort of work. And then also work to serve the what's loosely referred to, right, as the underbanked or unbanked populations who primarily maybe use the payday kind of stores that allow them to deposit their paycheck and basically get cash. That sort of organization provides a service, but let's just say there's some challenges in that business model.
What are the current challenges in that business model?
I think frankly that it's done at a fee and takes probably in some respects is probably taking advantage of people's lack of understanding about how much they can have control of their own finances. You could imagine being able to, for example, without a bank, deliver to people in a more direct way money, their access to their cash, or putting into an app, a store like a safe. I don't want to promote any particular product, but you think of resources like a PayPal where you basically can have a cash store, right? And that is generally tied to a bank, but it might not have to be tied just to a bank, right? To the extent the technology companies and
You're
some
right.
are
You could just
looking
have
to
it
get
sit
bank
there.
charters. They're controlling the value and they hold on to that. And so I think and you can imagine being able to transfer payments in that way so that your money goes into something like that, as opposed to having to have another an intermediary who's going to take maybe a larger percentage of your paycheck. And I think that's something that's changing, but I don't know about here in LA, but I go to New York and you see those stores still exist, right? Where people show up
Yeah, same in
on
LA.
a Friday, right?
Yeah,
I expect they're
yeah.
still in LA here too, and that's a large part of the population, and that's the U.S. Think about when you move outside of the
Right.
U.S. What's happening with people and their access to money and their ability to understand how they can manage their own money. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Yeah.
Can you think of any examples of overseas, maybe in some third world or developing countries, where this could be helpful or maybe already is starting to be implemented?
Yeah, so I think it's M-Pesa is one example, and there are other examples where people figured out very fast that you could actually, in those economies, leapfrog to payment and banking systems on the mobile apps, because there weren't banking institutions. There weren't the financial networks
Right,
already
because
in
they
place.
don't have,
Because they
in
weren't,
some of these
right,
countries, they
or
don't
they
have
were very
any
limited in
options.
their reach, right? And they certainly weren't getting out to people in more rural and remote areas, right? And not everybody even in the urban centers that might exist. And so having those sort of apps where everybody has a phone, and it doesn't, it may be only I can deliver them a paycheck and I can give them a few apps to do a handful of things, right? So they can pay certain key bills or be able to walk to a retail interface and make payments. So it's maybe not pervasive, but it provides people one step closer to having true control over their finances than they would have otherwise. So I think there's already some examples out there, and I think it's only going to grow.
Wow.
As you see people do, what's actually really pretty impressive is I think people also figured out, well, you got to get the internet there with sufficient bandwidth to do that
Right.
effectively, and that's starting to happen as well.
Right. Do you know what country it was? I thought I saw a country where some staggering number, like 80-90% of its people have jumped on. I think it was Impreza, the app that you just said.
I think it's M-Pesa.
M-Pesa.
Yeah. I believe that's right.
Yeah, somewhere I think in like East Africa or something like that. There was a
Yeah,
country
that
where
I could believe that. I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know they're reaching both in Latin America and in Africa areas that were essentially not banked at all, and being able to at least provide mobile, ways to transmit money and implement payments.
Yeah.
And that's what 90% of what most people do with their money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. How long has this fintech industry been around? Because it's pretty new, right?
So
Or
yes
maybe
and
not.
no. Well, so back to my education. We'll come full circle, which is, so what I was doing before I went to law school was developing a smart card system that was being implemented by a spinoff from Sallie Mae, of all folks, because what they had was relationship with universities, and you could pretty easily go into a closed system like a university and create, and when I say smart card, chip cards, which we now see pretty ubiquitous today. Back then were not, but they were being used in Europe very widely for telephone cards, and they were starting to be used in systems like universities for vending machines and laundry machines, and you could put some security functions on the chip as well, and let that use for dorm room access. And part of the reason it was schools were driving it is because they get the payments, and they put everyone at the university had their card for for food in the cafeteria. Well, you can use that card for a bunch of other things if it's a chip card as well. And so and that's in fintech.
That was fintech.
That was fintech. There was a bank that was partnering with us to do that. That was fintech. So in some sense, it's been there. And same with the banks using technology to implement investment management. That was always there. It wasn't at the scale it is now. And when I say always there, it's been there for decades. So it's not, by that I mean, it's not new. I think what's new is a couple of things. AI. for sure. The ability to use it at the scale that people can, I think, is transforming the way what fintech looks like. I think the ubiquity of the mobile phone, right? So now the ability to have that processing power in the hands of your end user, that changes everything, because you can, besides payments, you can put all kinds of apps there. And then obviously processing power. What was rooms full, I can literally remember rooms full of data centers full of servers can now be done on one machine, right? So those things have changed, but the technology was in financial services for some time.
Kind of back to the banks, what do you think this means for banking jobs?
I think a banking job becomes a different kind of job. I think there is a money management job of some sort, right? That always has to be in place until we figure out some way to move to a world where we don't exchange value.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what that would look like when you think about it. So,
or I mean, I think if you're saying that AI is being implemented into financial advising, does that mean potential, danger, but change for the financial advising industry?
Less of the classic trader, you need less of your classic investment advisor. But that doesn't mean you don't need someone, because there's always some need for human beings to supplement what the machine does, right? You have results. You still may want to advise someone. People still want some human contact to be like, yeah, the machine got the right answer, and you can trust it. If it's nothing else, you want that, right? I think then we hope what humans are left to do is think kind of more broadly and more strategically about what we do. So maybe you do get to systems that are more sophisticated in serving the unbanked, instead of all of our resources being focused on solving the same problems over and over again, right? But I don't know. Does that mean in the short term, just like you see with any change in industry, that you don't see some people who are left behind because they don't know how to implement the technology in a way that continues to give them relevance in their job? Sure. I think that it happened in manufacturing. It certainly can happen in banking.
I heard that the financial crisis of 2008 was actually opened the door for fintech to now be thriving like it is now. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, I've heard people say that, and I guess there's some truth in that it put a bunch of folks who had very sophisticated knowledge about the financial markets, looking for something to do. And some pretty well capitalized, but just not having a current home, right? When the Lehmans and others folded. And so, I think that drove people to look at entrepreneurial endeavors, and that with the combination of technology being available, by then you did have, if not just the chip cards, but you did have the mobile.
Not just chip cards. Had advanced a little bit.
Yeah, things had advanced beyond that. You did have the banking power on the mobile device. I think that did lead to a lot of development in fintech in ways that might not have happened otherwise. Yeah, or at least not accelerated as quickly as it did.
What has this boom meant for your firm?
Oh, that's for our firm. Well, I don't want to speak. I'm not going to speak broadly for the firm in terms of fintech boom, but I think, is it what all of our clients have, or many of our clients are focused on and are using to transform themselves? Sure. And are we advising them in any number of ways that relates to? Yes, absolutely. We service many industries other than financial services, so I don't think.
Or I guess has your technology side of your firm, has it expanded because of this boom, or have you seen more demand for your services in this area?
No, I don't know. It's a question of expanding in this area as much as it is. It's a competency you have to have now, whereas maybe it was optional before that. I think that to understand, to service financial services clients or clients who are making large investments, whether it's private equity or it's in public companies, that to not understand how much technology impacts those areas and impacts not only the way they invest, but what they're investing in. I think that's a core component of what we do. And so that's a competency that we do have and we continue to grow. Whether it's additive in a way that is substantial, Yeah, I think there's so many other ways that technology has been additive in terms of the opportunities for an intellectual property lawyer like me, but also for other lawyers in terms of the types and the breadth of investments and acquisitions and
Yeah.
other transactions that we support. Yeah, I think there's no question that Silicon Valley is good for
Yeah.
for the work we do, and generally the boom in technology is good for what we do.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd limit that to fintech.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.